Welcome to Commander Central, episode 291, and today we'll be talking about Mark Rosewater's recent article going over the changes and the clarifications to the color pie. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
Gentlemen, how's it going this afternoon? How you guys doing?
Wonderful.
Pretty good. It's Thursday. When this airs, it'll be Monday, and I will have successfully seen an NHL game over the weekend.
That's right. You're going to watch the Ducks and the Wild, I believe. Is that correct?
Correct. Saturday night, it'll be a good time. I don't expect us to win, but I expect it to be close.
Now, are you going to wear your Ducks paraphernalia despite going into hostile territory?
Oh, yeah.
All right, good for you.
Last time we did this, a 12-year-old called me a word I can't say on this show. And that was after we won, too. And as I looked at his parent with the kid, she looked at him and said, he's not in trouble. You're wearing the wrong colors. I said, well, we effing won, you stupid woman, and I walked away.
That's a fair point. If you wear the opposing team's jersey into someone's home ice, I feel like you maybe deserve a little bit of heckling. I get that.
I mean, if the Yankees and Red Sox have been doing it for years, exactly. The West Coast hockey team versus the Central hockey team, it's not as bad.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I buy that. So did anybody get a chance to play any fun games this week? Max, have you got a chance to fire your zombie deck up anymore?
No, not yet. Maybe this weekend, but probably next week.
Okay.
I got to play. Ha 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 ha.
Oh, you did?
Surprise.
How'd that go, Chris?
So I played on a Thursday night with two of the other shop employees. The store went dead at 9 o'clock, so we just sat down and played EDH until close. So they said, well, we're going to play low power decks. So I pulled out my spiders.
Okay.
And proceeded to see that the one person was playing Azorius, birds or flyers or something like that. And then the other person was playing an Atraxa Precon.
Okay.
So already I locked the Flyers player out of the game with all my spiders. Just
sure.
Because I could block for days. And the Atraxa player started doing, Atraxa stuff out of the Precon, making big fatties, made a bunch of birds or something like that. Or, no, spirits off of Custody Spellbinders. Is that the name of the card?
Yeah.
The white one?
Yep.
So she proceeded to nuke out the other player and then turned on me, and I just sat there and stared at her with one green mana open. And she's a new player. And the other player's just like, you don't have it, do you? I was like, I don't know. We're going to find out, aren't we? And she full out swung at me. And I'm like, fog.
That always feels so good.
And because I play every version of fog in my spiders deck just to be on theme, spiders coming out of the fog and stuff like that. And she looks at it, she's like, that's a cheating card. And then I proceeded to kill her with 8/1/1 spider, 8/1/2 spiders on the next crackback. It was great.
Nice. Plus, the best part about the kind of fog like that too is then the next time, even if you don't have it, they're going to be afraid that you do.
Yes, they're always going to think about it. And then I'm going to have the 2 mana one or the 3 mana constant mists or something. I got them all.
Oh, that's great. Well, I went to the shop on Tuesday this week and played, but a friend, a coworker whose son has just started learning to play, wanted to come into the shop and try to play games with people besides just his 1 or 2 classmates that also are kind of new to the game. So he came in, so I sat with him and then I found 2 other relatively new players too, just by asking around, people that were coming in that looked kind of lost. You can usually tell by the look in their eyes if they are new or not.
Yeah, we were scary packed at the beginning of the night with new people.
But it was young people too. There was quite a few kids in there playing. So I grabbed him and grabbed grabbed 2 other players, and we wound up playing, I think, 3 games. And it was really fun. Even playing a low power deck, and I was still just not playing cards. I was definitely having to pull, all kinds of punches. Just because even with a low power deck, the difference in what you know how to do and what they know how to do are totally different things.
Yes.
At one point I board wiped and somebody else board wiped, and someone had a Wormcoil engine out, and I'm like, I could destroy the Wormcoil engine in response to the board wipe. That way the tokens come down before the board wipe hits.
Yep, proper gameplay.
And would go away as well. But I'm like, I don't need to explain the timing on those stack rules right now, and I don't want to, she was so excited to be getting the 2 tokens anyway. I'm like, I'm just going to let that go. So it was a lot of that kind of thing.
Oh, I know who you were playing with. Yes. I never did catch her name, but I know her husband and her daughter, they come in and play Pokemon all the time.
So she started playing Magic. Yep. She said her daughter plays, I think, Pokemon, and her husband plays whatever miniature game he plays. It's she wanted to find something too when she's at the shop. So Yeah, they were all a lot of fun. They were really good games, so I enjoyed being able to teach those new players for a couple hours, and then I got one game in of regular Commander with friends before I took off. So, and in that game, I will say I managed to kill all 3 people with Vorpal Sword.
Oh, with that the
Vorpal
actual
Sword
like
trigger.
oh the like the where
Yep.
you the 8 mana or whatever it is or 7
Yeah.
mana to activate it.
I had it on Silumgar. So it had hexproof too, and I'm like, all right, we've got 3 turns here. Let's see if you guys can figure it out. And nobody found a way to stop Silumgar from swinging through. So
That's gross.
listen, I mean, it's a 6 mana commander, and it's 1 mana for the artifact, 2 to equip it, 8 to activate the ability. Like, and it took 3 turns. I'm like, oh, okay, you guys.
Yeah, I don't
feel
think
too
that's
bad about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like you're sitting back and you have it suited up, and then you're like, every time they go to remove it, you're like, counter,
Right.
counter.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like any piece of artifact removal would have solved the problem. Just nobody happened to have it. So, and the game was, it was a relatively long game at that point too, so I didn't feel too bad about it. And everyone just laughed because it was what a ridiculous way to lose a game.
That is
so. Yeah,
great.
I had a good time too. And I think the new players, my coworker's son is going to start coming in every other Tuesday to play like that. And then now once I mentioned that to my son, because this is a kid he plays D&D with, he's like, oh, I'll start coming on Tuesday then. So he's going to start coming every other week too to play with the other kids. So
yeah, I'm going to have
for
to.
at least a few hours after. So yeah, if you have anybody else, Chris, that that has kids, roughly that age that want to start playing, we'll have at least 2 more that are coming in on every other Tuesday to play.
There's been quite a few newer people who've been coming in and they've been asking questions about stuff, and they're never coming in on a Tuesday. It's a different day of the week. So, and I haven't seen them come back in, but usually when new players come in, either Ben goes and grabs a couple of people, or I've come over and asked you and Max before, like, hey, there's new people, we want to play with them and stuff like that. So that's how I think we're going to approach it going forward.
And then I play Brago.
Just stomp everybody.
Yep.
Well, so no, that would probably be an okay deck to play with them as long as you, pull your punches type of thing.
Yes.
Just so they understand, how triggers work with decks, because that deck has a lot of triggers, so they'll understand how everything's working.
True.
Well, I will also put this out there because I thought it was kind of funny. I stopped at the shop last night to pick up a couple singles I needed before I played on stream with a deck, and one of the shop employees, Ben, mentioned that some guy had just came in earlier who had just moved back here from, I think it was Wyoming or Montana.
Oh, wow.
And was asking the shop if they had an EDH night, and Ben's like, yeah, we every Tuesday people come in and play. He's like, oh, good. I'm really getting back into Magic. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, and Ben's like, oh, what do you listen to? And I was like, oh yeah, EDH Trekcast and Commander Central, and Ben's like, oh, because those guys play here, He's like, what? And he's like, yeah, they've probably mentioned the store on the shop on the show multiple times. Chris works here. He's just not here tonight. Dane and Max here are here pretty frequently. This is their store they play at. And he was like just shocked. He had no idea.
It's awesome to meet people, but it's also like a shocker too at the same time. They're just like, wait, I know you. I recognize your voice. And I'm like, no, you don't. You don't know me from anywhere.
Yeah, it is such a strange thing to have people like that, live halfway across the country that have listened to your show, I suppose. Then all of a sudden, yeah, that's definitely an odd thing to run into.
Yeah,
and of course, all the places to have moved, and then just coincidentally enough.
Yeah,
so,
it's great. I do love running into our listeners though. It's great to see how they have their decks, and I get stomped every time we end up playing. So anyone listening, you guys want to come play with us and stomp me anytime, I'm free to play.
Chris is always open for it, for sure. He'll throw some spiders your way and then maybe fog you.
Oh, I absolutely love that deck too. Like, I don't even want to rip it apart. I want to tune it a little bit more now, just because it's so much fun.
I love when you find that you build a deck, like, let's see how it works, and then it winds up being just a blast to play. That always feels so good.
I don't think I can ever make it super powerful, like, upper echelon, but I will make it a little bit better.
That's one thing I've kind of liked with this. Now that I've finally just settled on Silumgar Dragons, is I'm like, well, it's playing blue-black dragons. I've got a cap. There's only so much I can do with blue-black dragons. There's just not very many good ones.
Yeah, that is true.
So if you out there in listener land want to reach out to us and tell us about any fun games you played or anything exciting happening in your EDH world, how would you go about doing that, Chris?
You can find us on a multitude of social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter at CMDR Central. You can search us up on Facebook, CMDR Central. You can find us on YouTube by searching CMDR Central, and you can also find us online at cmdrcentral.com.
You can also head over to patreon.com/CMDRCentral and check out our reward tiers, such as a Decks You Play show, or just joining our community to chat with us and play virtual EDH. This week we want to say hello and welcome to a few new patrons: Michael Barrett, Timothy Pollard, IA Command, and Thomas Hughes.
Thank you all to those new patron supporters. Thank you to our existing supporters, and basically to anyone out there who supports the show in any way you can or do, whether it's by liking or upvoting us on your social media or podcast app of choice, or just listening and tuning in. We really appreciate it. It does mean a lot. And to show that appreciation, we have a couple things we're going to give away this month. So if you like or retweet the tweet we're sending out on Monday when these shows go live, we have 6 different play mats we're giving away to someone who likes or retweets onto Twitter, and those were provided to us by listener and past guest and patron supporter Craig DeBevick. So thank you for that, Craig. We've got 6 different ones: a GP Richmond Sun Cleanser, a Nahiri the Harbinger, a Noxious Gear Hulk, a Thorncaster Sliver, an Unstable Very Cryptic Command, and a Amonkhet Worthy Challenger. So we'll give away all 6 of those to 6 different Twitter listeners at random. And Craig also hooked us up with a Commander Collection green sealed box to give away to one of our patron supporters. So if you are a patron supporter by the end of October, you'll be entered in to have a chance to win that Commander Collection green, also from Craig. So thank you to everyone, and thanks to Craig. We appreciate it. Before we jump into the main topic, I was just going to ask you guys, so we recorded last Thursday when only a couple of the Stranger Things cards had been spoiled, and I think now we have the full set of 8, plus I guess there was a land that was revealed yesterday as well that's part of that set. It's like the bonus card they put in, like Lucille was with The Walking Dead. Do you have any final thoughts now that you've seen all those cards together, Max? Is that something that you're interested in now that you've seen all 8 of them?
Yeah, I definitely am probably going to pick up a copy of the Stranger Things Secret Lair. There are a few cards that I'm interested in. I like the Lucas and Max cards. There's a little bias there in the name. But I like what those cards do, and I'm probably going to try to retweak my side deck around those as Friends Forever. And that land in there is super cool. It investigates and then flips over and reanimates something, and then it can flip back, so it's not just stuck on one side once you flip it. So yeah, I'm really interested in quite a few cards in that set, and I definitely will be picking one up, and, it won't get here till next year, but I'll get one.
How about you, Chris? Is that something you're interested in?
No. To be honest, none of the Secret Lairs have ever stuck out to me. It's something that I want. As singles come into, the store or whatever, I might pick up a few here and there, but Secret Lairs are just kind of, they're fun, cool, jazzy things that people like to have, and me personally, it doesn't quite, float my boat. That's a good word for you there.
Sure.
Good with saying.
I wound up ordering one, Max, yesterday once the land got spoiled. I was probably going to do it anyway, but that was kind of the thing that pushed me over the top. I'm like, this is just a fun thing. I'm going to get it. The price is pretty reasonable for 9 cards as well. They are going to get reprinted, I believe, in the list. Is that correct?
Yeah, they will get
in 6 months
spots.
Or something.
Correct.
So there'll be other ways to get them too, but...
Do they say what set that's going to be in? Is that for sure going to be in the Commander Legends Baldur's Gate or whatever then?
I think it was supposed to be in... What's the crime plane? The name escapes me currently.
No, I don't remember, but the second set of next year.
New Capenna, I believe, is where it's supposed to be in the list for New Capenna, but I could be wrong about that.
So in your set boosters and collector boosters.
Yep. So yeah, it's neat. It's a neat thing. I still don't love mechanically unique cards in Secret Lairs, but the fact they're going to reprint them, I guess, takes some of that off as well, and I do think they're pretty fun, so I wound up going with that.
They're definitely not as bad as the Walking Dead ones, because the mechanics aren't technically unique, I guess. Some of them aren't. It's just, different wording of it as how it works.
Well, one of the problems with the Walking Dead ones too was Rick was legacy playable.
Yep.
Whereas these are just very much Commander. I mean, obviously these are all legacy playable too, but they're probably not good enough for it. Whereas Rick was good enough to play in legacy. These aren't going to be that. These are going to be Commander only for the most part. The power level on them is a little bit pulled back from where the Walking Dead one was, so that's probably less of a problem as well for people, I would guess.
Well, sometimes you got to throw those legacy players a bone because their decks never change, for years and years and years. So
yeah, for sure. I get that. The other thing we got was a Secret Lair announcement I will just briefly mention. I mean, there was a handful of them that were announced in the last week or so, different cool art things. But the one that I do want to talk about briefly is the Secret Lair Extra Life 2021 announcement. So they're going to give, I believe it's 50% of each purchase of this is going to go to Extra Life, which is a really good charity that supports the Children's Miracle Network and the Seattle Children's Hospital. So it does a lot of good work. But beyond that, These cards are super, super cool. So if you haven't seen them, what they did was they gave 3 kids basically like, draw me what you think a Crater Hoof Behemoth is. Draw me what you think a Muldrifter is or a Metalwork Colossus. So these little kids drew their version of those creatures. So there will be a card that has, for art, the kids' version of a Crater Hoof Behemoth and the kids' version of a Muldrifter and a Metalwork Colossus, which looks exactly like you'd expect from a 5-year-old. And then they had a real Magic artist do their interpretation of that kid's drawing. So you have this crazy real artist version of a Crater Hoof Behemoth and a Muldrifter and a Metalwork Colossus that are all insane looking. So 6 cards technically, because you're going to get 2 versions of each, the kid's version of one and the artist's rendition of the kid's version. It's a really cool product just in general. It's super hilarious to see this insane looking Muldrifter and this insane looking Crater Hoof Behemoth. And it's also for a good cause. So I wanted to just touch on that briefly. I think it's super fun.
Do you know when this one goes on sale?
It is on sale right now through, I think, the end of or middle of November, I believe, because this one I also pre-ordered. So I think this one's live. You know, I could be mistaken. Maybe I'm confusing that with the Secret Lair for. I didn't order this yet. So ignore me. It's gonna go on sale November 5th through November 8th. So I was conflating that with Secret Lair 1.
No, so this one's coming out in November.
Yep, that's when it goes on sale. I'm not sure when it ships.
All I know is that Crater Hoof Behemoth, that's what it should look like. It won't even get me angry anymore seeing it come into the battlefield.
I mean, Crater Hoof is always an expensive card anyway, and this is $40 for a non-foil, and you're getting 2 copies of Crater Hoof. I mean, That's a pretty good deal just on its own. Muldrifter is always playable. Metalwork Colossus is a neat card, so the money goes to a good cause. I think this was a cool thing.
I think so too. Yep. I looked it up right now so I could see the arts and everything on there, and I'm just like, I kind of want to invest
How
in
great
this.
is that Muldrifter and that Crater Hoof Behemoth, though?
I know, I love it.
So yeah, that's a lot of fun. All right, our main topic here we're gonna delve into is the article Mark Rosewater wrote this week about the color pie and changes to it. And by changes, that doesn't necessarily mean we're gonna do this differently. Some of that is we've already been doing this differently, and what I had written down in, I think it was 2018, doesn't entirely apply anymore because we started altering things. So number one, some of this is updating the color pie based on changes they've already made, and some of it is updating it based on things that they've probably already done that we haven't seen yet. So it's both a clarification of past changes, so what they had written down matches what we've already seen, and it's an update based on things that we are going to see that are going to be coming down the road. And we're not going to go through the whole thing and read the whole thing. We're not even going to probably read most of Merrill's words. We're just going to talk about the things that kind of jumped out at us as interesting and that we wanted to comment on for one reason or another in ways that were relevant to Commander players, because this is just all of Magic, right? So some changes are going to be changes that don't really affect us, and some of them are changes that don't really affect anybody. They're just clarifications in general, but some of them do matter, and I wanted to talk about a few of the ones that do matter.
I do like in the beginning of his article, he's like, a lot of this is just me removing slang terms.
Right, kind of, yeah.
Considers a slang term of bounce. Bounce is a slang term, I guess. I'm just this is slang. Yeah. Huh? Okay, I must be real old school.
So the first one I will comment on that I thought was kind of interesting was the article, or the bit on artifact destruction. In the main note that changed here, that Mero noted, was he used to say that white's artifact destruction is usually at uncommon, and he's changed that to say that white is now getting more artifact destruction at common, and that artifact destruction can usually also hit enchantment. So basically like a disenchant at common. This is more of an issue for draft for the most part, or limited. Like, Commander players absolutely run artifact removal, but it's usually the more premium spells. We're not running the draft chaff ones that you maybe use in your draft. What I will note here, though, is the thing that he didn't write. So recently we've gotten a little bit of blue artifact destruction, Raven form and Resculpt primarily, and when the previous version of this article came out in 2018, it didn't mention blue getting artifact destruction. That was clearly something they then dabbled with after the article came out, and they've since said they're not going to do any more of it. It was like something they tried twice. They decided they don't want to do it. And this is, I guess, the fact that it doesn't mention blue getting artifact destruction in here means it's something that they are very much noting as something they're not doing anymore. So they didn't even bother talking about it because it's gone. So like it didn't exist in the previous version and doesn't exist now, so it's just not mentioned at all. So for anyone who likes Ravenform and Resculpt, prepare yourself that you're not going to see any more versions of those two cards. That's a twice and done thing in blue to deal with artifacts.
Interesting. I didn't even think about those cards, to be honest with you.
I do quite like Resculpt, and Ravenform is okay as well. I mean, like if you're playing Mono Blue or even Dimir, where you just don't have any other alternatives, I think they're pretty playable. So I wanted to mention that. Those will be that's not something we're going to see more of down the road, and I guess this kind of confirms it.
Yeah, well, the next one you're going to talk about is what Blue's primary way of taking care of that kind of stuff is anyways.
So the next one on here is you talked about bounce being slaying. Well, that's one of the ones here too, is bouncing things to. There's a couple different versions of bounce to hand or whatever. And this is primarily bouncing to library. White used to have this as a thing. You could the one that jumps out at me is unexpectedly absent. So you bounce a thing to the top of someone's library, and whatever X you spend, it goes that many cards down. So if X is 2, it's 2 cards down. If it's 10, it's 10 cards down. They are noting that white is no longer going to be doing this. It's taking away the ability to bounce things to the library. What it doesn't comment on is whether or not that's going to affect things that shuffle into the library, like Oblation, or things that go to the bottom of the library, like Condemn, or I guess just Terminus does that too, doesn't it?
Yeah, but
On
top
the bottom
or
of the
bottom?
library, I believe.
I thought it was your choice. You could top or bottom them. I don't remember.
Terminus is bottom.
It's just bottom? Okay. So it doesn't really comment on whether it's shuffle, but I would guess top of the library is less punishing than shuffle or bottom usually. So I'm going to guess if they're going to take away the less punishing one, they're also going to take away the more punishing ones. But then again, we haven't got those in a long time. I can't think of the last time you've got a shuffle. Like Oblation's a 15-year-old card. At this point, Terminus is 10 years old.
The closest thing would be probably Teferi, Hero of Dominaria.
Yeah.
Well, yes, it is blue-white, but that's still within the white pie that
Right.
You would have had something that, because it was the top 3 down or something like that.
And I would guess they would probably even then say, well, it's blue, so it's fine.
Yeah. Or
so I'm going to guess we're not going to see that anymore in white, just moving forward.
Approach of the Second Sun was another one that was more recent, I guess, too. But
even then,
it targets yourself type of thing.
Right, yeah. The only thing about this I thought was funny is, like, I don't think white needs to lose things. I don't think white is that strong that you need to take things away from it, even if they're not things that are that powerful. But, I mean, I don't think it's that big of a deal. Do you guys have any thoughts on this one?
The only thing I can really say is I kind of agree with you. Taking stuff away from white just kind of seems absent-minded, maybe. Like, what is the thought process of taking it away when white doesn't have a lot of tools compared to the other colors? So I guess I'd like more explanation from WotC on that.
Okay. Especially when it's a thing that isn't affecting other formats either. Like, none of those cards are getting played really anywhere. I guess Terminus used to get played in, I think, Miracles. But, I mean, that's in a format that is so busted anyway. Like, I can't believe that's the problem. So, yeah, that one just seemed weird to me.
I think, so I read the whole article yesterday, and Mara repeatedly goes into the fact with white that they want to stick to the aspect of white being a army type of theme, that is the color, whatever they do, their mechanic type of thing, whatever you want to call it, is about, creating an army of soldiers that does this, this, and this. And I suppose bouncing in the library doesn't fit that aspect. But if you're going to pull it out, I'd like to see more stuff that's going to support then those little weenies, like more anthems, more indestructible things. I mean, stuff like that to actually make that type of way that you want the white to play better.
Yeah, if you're going to take something away, I feel like there should be something that kind of makes up for that.
Yeah, I mean, stop giving green everything. Come on, guys.
I'm sure we will comment on that, because there's a few of those things in here that I'm like, really? Green needed that? The next one is card draw. They talk about, it says blue is best at card draw, which, I guess we've already kind of known. It says green's card draw is tied to creatures, and in the past they've had it tied to lands, but that ended up making it a little bit too much like card draw in blue, so they've gotten rid of that. It's now almost exclusively tied to creatures. All colors get cantrips. Blue gets the best ones. White gets the best cantrip smaller creatures, and green gets the best large cantrip creatures. I'm not sure I see a ton of that anyway, but that's what they say they're doing. White is still basically last at card draw, but they're adding some new abilities. And the big limitation is white tends to draw over time rather than all at once, which I guess we've seen with, the Keeper of the Accord kind of cards where, or Esper Sentinel as well, where it's like every turn you can do a thing. So we have been getting a few more of those. It also notes that red only draws cards if it's impulsive draw, if it's a Punisher effect, or if it's a wheel, which we already kind of knew as well. So I guess the only thing worth commenting on here is they are still aware that white is, not up to snuff in card draw, but they're working on it. So
I would like to see
good.
white get card draw similar to how green does, in an aspect of like where I can't think of any of the names of the cards. Like I think okay, we could use Ancient Stirrings, for instance, where you look at the top X cards of the deck, but you can add one of those cards to your hand, but it has to follow within a certain criteria. That's how I'd like to see white's card draw turn into then.
Sure, look at the top 5 cards of your library and put a creature with power 3 or less into your hand or something.
Or an enchantment or something, because white's big on their enchantments and stuff like that. Yeah, that's what I would like to see, because that would actually make white a little bit more viable to play.
I think the only problem with that kind of thing is, like, if they release one decent impulse draw red spell per set, well, that can maybe go in any red deck, assuming that it, is what you want to do. Versus, like, if it only cares about an enchantment or a creature or something, then there's a bunch of white decks that can't use it because you're like, well, my white deck does this. It only has 6 creatures or whatever.
Yeah, that's true.
But that is what it is. Like, maybe that's just something you have to deal with because not everything can be perfect, and maybe that's fine too. So... Well, you mentioned Ancient Stirring, Chris. That's the next one here is card draw as filtering on the list here. And green used to be secondary, and now it's bumped up to primary alongside blue. We don't see a ton of this in Commander that gets, like, the green filters don't get used that much. The blue ones do. Ponder sees a lot of play, Preordain, Brainstorm, but the green ones don't see that much. My question about this is, given what a problem Ancient Stirrings has kind of been, and Once Upon a Time absolutely was. And they're like, well, those worked out so well, let's do more of it in green. That seems like a strange thing in other formats to have bumped up to primary. Does that also seem strange to you as someone who plays other formats?
Not really.
Okay.
I do like it. Now, while Ancient Stirrings is annoying because it goes for, colorless things, if they limit that portion of it, I don't think it'll be bad. Because I've seen a few decks that are playing... There was a new one that was printed in, I think it was Strixhaven or something like that, somewhere around it, or maybe it's Modern Horizons, that lets you go for a creature or a land off the top, like top 3 or top 4 or something like that, which is more what green should be doing as well. That I'm fine with, but if you start going, blatantly into, like, I think Once Upon a Time was something you could cast for free at the beginning of your turn or something like that. So, yeah, that's a little too aggressive with it.
Well, I guess that's maybe the point. Maybe the problem isn't the filtering. It's a problem that, like, free spells are always a problem in some formats.
Well, they're a problem in, like, every form. I mean, they banned Gataxian Probe, and then you print another free spell, and it's just what?
For sure. Yeah, so maybe the problem is how they implemented them versus just green filtering at all. So yeah, no, that makes sense. Less of a thing in Commander, but was worth noting.
Yes.
We have the destroy target creature category, and this one is kind of broken up in the one I wanted to point out was destroy target creature and its controller gets compensation. This is primarily white, and blue also used to have this, and it was flavored as transformation. So like your Pongify kind of effects, destroy a thing, and its controller gets compensation. That's being removed from blue, it looks like. So your rapid hybridizations, your Pongifys, your reality shifts are getting taken away from blue. I run all of those cards. I've seen Max at least run them. Chris doesn't play much blue, but I've seen them in Max's deck. So I'm curious what you think, Max. My opinion is, I run them. They're awesome, but I feel like blue doesn't really need it, so I don't mind blue losing that. What do you think?
Yeah, I tend to agree. It feels weird running those type of spells in blue, especially when you give them a token back. Like, we were talking about Resculpt where they get a 4/4 artifact. That just seems weird.
Yeah.
I would like to see more in white, because the only one that really comes to mind for me is Generous Gift.
Sure.
I'm sure there are others out there if this is going to become primary white, or had this been a secondary, but I would really like to see where this goes moving forward with, what plays on Generous Gift or Pongify can white start using moving forward.
Yeah, because aside from Generous Gift, the really good versions of this we've seen in the last few years have been in blue.
Well, I was thinking more of Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares type effects.
Mm-hmm.
Because what it is that it's compensating the controller for destroying that creature.
Right.
So it's either life or you're getting a land out of it, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and also the problem with blue is Pongify and hybridization and reality shift are so good, they probably weren't going to print a better version anyway. So you're just going to keep running those 3 versions in blue, and any new versions probably would have been inferior. Kind of the same problem with white and Swords to Plowshares and Path. Those are so great, they're not going to print better versions of them. So any attempts are just probably not going to get ran because you're not going to bump Swords and Path out of decks.
Yeah, I do. I find it weird for draft purposes because I always remember usually a set has at least one of these in there of some sort.
Yeah.
And it's usually upper on curve and it's just a horrible card to begin with. But in a draft setting, it's really good.
It's also a much bigger deal, particularly in a draft too, to give somebody a 3/3 ape, particularly like in a draft or like in a pre-release or something, and that kind of a limited environment. That's a much more impactful trade-off than it is in Commander.
Yes, by far. I mean, yeah, so I'm getting rid of your 6/6 or whatever because I can't afford to take 6. Well, now I got a 3/3 that I got to figure out how to deal with as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as bad, but it's still a problem, for sure.
Yep.
Enchantment Destruction is next here, and it's noted that black is now moved to secondary in Enchantment Destruction, and we've gotten a few cards here, Feed the Swarm being the one that probably sees the most play currently. That's something they're going to keep doing. Unlike the blue Artifact Destruction, black is going to keep getting enchantment removal. The only note I really have here is I've never felt like black needed it. I kind of have always liked that black couldn't deal with artifacts or enchantments. I think it's kind of a fun restriction. It feels very black that you can't solve some problem. You just have to like remove the player to remove the permanent. That feels very black to me. However, I'm going to run it. Like, if they're going to give it to me, I'm going to use it. So I guess that's fine. Do you guys have any thoughts on this one?
My biggest thought with this is that I was okay with it because I look at it as the color pie, you know, red and green, or not red and green, white and green both have really good removal for both aspects.
Yep.
Blue has absolutely nothing because it's horrendous and it just, you know, it can counter stuff, whatever. But red has just artifact. So why not give black just enchantment then, you know? So it's like, kind of a trade-off there.
It does make sense that every color has a weakness to just one thing, whereas black had weaknesses to 2. It just couldn't touch artifacts or enchantments. And that felt bad when you were playing Rakdos. Kind of like, well, I can't deal with enchantments with either of my colors. They don't support anything.
I got a 1 in 70 chance to draw my Chaos Warp. I got this,
right,
guys.
Exactly. Better hit that Chaos Warp. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, no, it's never felt like never stopped me from playing black, but I'm going to keep using it if they're going to keep making those cards. So I'm fine with it.
I would like to see what they do with this, because if I recall correctly, the article mentioned how like black, you know, for enchantment removal in the past, does have things like you have to sacrifice something to get rid of the enchantment.
Yep.
I would really like to see more cards like that where sacrifice a creature or sacrifice X amount of creatures to destroy target enchantment versus, you know, lose life equal to the enchantment CMC. It'd be cool to see what they do in that space.
It would be cool to see it where sacrifice an enchantment to destroy an enchantment or something like that as well. You know, like some staple. I do like creature or it could be like creature or enchantment. Because, you know, black's all about, you know, I will remove all of my soul to just completely obliterate you type of thing.
Yeah, I like that, the point where I want it to be flavored like black stuff. I don't want it to just be destroy target enchantment. I want it to have a black flavor to it. So, yeah, no, I agree. Up next, we have the Enchantress ability, this is the one that really annoyed me more than anything. So they're noting that green is moving up to primary alongside white and getting enchantresses. What has annoyed me about this is green's always been primary and enchantresses. The only one in white is Mesa Enchantress. I guess you have technically Shram does it for auras, as does Core Spirit Dancer, but green has 5 different enchantresses.
Mm-hmm.
Green's always been primary here, and to say that it's just moving up to primary is not really true, and to say white is primary wasn't true either. Like, if they were really clarifying this, it should have been green is primary, white is secondary. It doesn't affect anything, but it's one of those things where I feel like what WotC thinks is happening and what is really happening out there aren't the same things. And this is an example of that, where like green's always been primary. How can you possibly act like it wasn't?
Yeah, because there's like 4 enchantresses in green, and yeah, that's weird. I wonder if this is something that was overlooked for quite a while, and then all of a sudden someone brought it up tomorrow, and he's like, maybe we should change that.
Yeah, and they're like, we don't want to tell everyone that white's secondary because they'll get mad, but it is. Like, the reality is it is. So
white is so good in draft and limited, though. It's hard to say that white's such a bad color, though.
For sure, yes. White is probably the color that translates the most poorly to EDH compared to how well it does elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I get that. That's tough to balance. I get that for sure. Up next, we have Haste, and Haste has moved up to secondary from tertiary in green. So green used to rarely get Haste, and now it's going to get it more often, but not as often as like red does.
As it should. Thank you.
Well, we talked about green getting more stuff, so it's I guess getting more enchantress effects, or at least they're clarifying that, but it's gonna get more haste too. Green's been getting haste. I guess it's gonna get a little more often. I don't think that's a huge problem. Do you guys have any thoughts about this in particular?
As long as we don't get more questing beasts, I think we'll be fine.
With 15 lines of text on it, yeah. Maybe we'll get a Concordant Crossroads reprint now.
Yeah, that could be something like that, or something along those lines, It would be nice to see them come back with a, world enchantments type of thing, And for all you youngins listen, world enchantments are enchanting the entire board. Everyone gets the effect. Local enchantments are enchantments that sit on your side of the field and only affect you type of thing. That's just how that works.
And world enchantments also, there only can be one in play at a time. So
yes.
You play your other world enchantment, it blows up someone else's world enchantment. So I don't think they've printed those since way back in what Alliances maybe. It's been around that era, I think.
Well, they reprinted Concordant Crossroads and Chronicles or something like that. So maybe that would have been the newest one.
It was originally in Legends, and then I got a Chronicles reprint. I do think there was a couple in Ice Age too.
Okay.
So we're talking
Mirage.
27
Mirage
years
had
ago.
A couple.
Did it?
Visions
Okay.
had a couple.
It wouldn't be bad to come back to that. It would be interesting gameplay type of thing to just have, you just set it in the center of the table and just be like, okay, so this affects everybody. And then, you can change it as the game goes on type of thing.
I'm kind of surprised they didn't try to revisit that mechanic in one of the Modern Horizon sets where they're just like, let's just try everything.
It might be something on the docket. You never know.
We could get in the Commander Legends for sure. I could see that. So next we have Reanimation. A couple comments here. White is moved from secondary to primary alongside black. White's always kind of got some reanimation. Black's is always way better. So I'm wondering if this means we're going to start getting some really solid white reanimation spells versus, the reincarnation kind of ones that cost 5 mana and don't do that much. Black has some absolute burners, and I wonder if we'll get some better ones from white now that it's moved up to primary. I'm kind of hopeful there.
Wouldn't surprise me. I mean, you see it throughout the past, Unburial Rites has a flashback of just white.
Yeah. Great card.
There's the X and double white one where you can return X creatures with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. I mean, there's so many good ones out there.
That one's an instant speed too, I think, which is really nice.
I mean, they're out there. It's just no one plays them because, as you said, black is just way better at doing it.
And the other reanimation note, I guess they count it as reanimation to hand. So if you like to bring a card from your graveyard to your hand, they list it as reanimation. In this case, it's artifacts. So like blue used to be primary at bringing artifacts from your graveyard back to your hand. That's going to white. So I guess white is getting something there. That's not that amazing, I don't think. And white has had it in the past. Argivian Restoration, I think, is one. So white's gotten this before, but in this case, it's going to be the primary thing, and blue is not going to be doing that anymore. So yeah, white's going to have ways to recur artifacts, at least to your hand, not straight into play necessarily, but that's useful. I'll take that.
Yep.
Additionally, tutoring for a land is something white's going to be getting, which we've been seeing. And they're just going to note they're going to keep doing that, particularly planes and particularly as a catch-up feature. So like the Archaeomancer's Map kind of effect, or is it Courier Hawk that does a similar thing? Or if you're behind on planes, like the old land tax effect, basically. If you're behind on planes, you can go get a planes or something.
Core Cartographer, Knight of the White Orchid. I mean, there's quite a few of them floating around.
So they're going to keep doing that in white. That's going to keep having the ability to tutor for lands. So the fact that they've noted that means it's going to something that they're going to keep playing with. The problem with a catch-up feature I found is, like, if you are using Green's Ramp or something, and you've already got a Nature's Lore in hand and a Cultivate in hand, and you draw Kodama's Reach, it doesn't feel great, but you can still cast all three of those and have them put lands into play. Like, you're still going to be lands ahead. Maybe isn't the best thing to do on one turn to spend 8 mana ramping lands out, but like, okay, if you live, the next turn you've got that much more mana and you're gonna, do things with that mana. Like it stacks, so to speak. Catch-up stuff doesn't stack. So like if you put 3 or 4 catch-up spells in your white deck and you have one in your hand and you draw one, and well, you're only behind one land, that spell, the second one is dead then. So that's something I think they need to be a little more cautious of with the catch-up effects, is if you can only run so many of them anyway, then printing new ones kind of becomes irrelevant. I think that's one thing that's nice about Archaeomancer's Map, is it lets you go get those lands, and then you can play the catch-up effect repeatedly. Whenever somebody else is ahead of you and plays a land, you can catch up to them. I think maybe that's what they're going to do, is look for ways to make it so it doesn't become redundant, I hope, but I'm glad they're going to keep doing something for white in tutoring for lands anyway. So that's something.
I would like to see them put it as, some sort of wording on there where, if an opponent controls more lands than you may search your deck for basic planes cards, put it in your hand. And then, a subtext of if an opponent controls 3 or more lands than you, that land can come into play tapped or something like that.
Sure.
Just so that ketchup is actually playing catch-up, so you don't have to waste your land drop for a turn type of thing.
Not just going to hand, going into play with some caveats. Like, yeah, if someone's way ahead, it's going to let you catch way ahead or something like that. Yeah, and I'm hoping we're going to see more of that. I think Archaeomancer's map was a clever implementation. I'm hoping we're going to see some more of that kind of thing.
Agreed.
Because you look back at Red, like the first couple Red impulse effects were relatively boring, and they've gotten much more creative with that as well. So I'm guessing they tend to start kind of slow and try to build and ramp upwards. So yeah, I'm hopeful there.
See how bad it is, and then just jam, a Faithless Looting into the format and see what happens.
Right. Let's see what happens with Jessica's Will.
Oh god, that's a really good card. I've gotten to cast it once, and it's really good.
Yeah, that feels so good. The last one I had here to talk about, I know Max has a few that jumped out at him he wants to mention here, is Vigilance is moving to secondary in blue, but they noted they're still trying to figure out how they want to implement it and on what creatures. So white angels tend to get Vigilance very heavily, but they don't put it on, soldiers very often or cats or something. So they're trying to figure out how that's going to take form in blue. I'm going to guess they start putting it on Sphinxes maybe, because that seems like Blue's version of Angels, and I could see that making sense, but I guess we'll find out. But Blue's going to be getting more Vigilance, just like Green's going to be getting more Haste.
Blue doesn't need Vigilance. Blue is hard enough to deal with in draft and stuff. Now they give him Vigilance? That's going to be annoying.
And that's where I think we're going to see it at first. We're going to see it on those 1/4 crabs and those 2/6 turtles that are just blue commons. So might as well give them Vigilance now.
But because Chris is right though, those are the pain in the butt to deal with in a draft.
Yes.
Someone drops that 1/5 turtle and you're like, oh god, I'm never going to punch through that. That's going to sit there. That turtle's going to sit there for 7 rounds.
That turtle is going to kill me.
Right. Yeah. And it has Vigilance. It's going to swing every turn, and I'm going to have to chump block and lose a creature. And then it's going to be available to soak up the 4/4 I played. Yeah, those are rough to go against for sure in draft. Okay, Max. So you had a couple you wanted to touch on here too that you thought were interesting.
Yeah, so the first one I saw came in the form of destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. This is primarily a white ability, and what I found interesting is that they have been and are working towards lowering that requirement to 3 instead of 4. So this will also apply on Wrath, where you have to have a certain power requirement. They're going to work towards it being most often 3 power, but occasionally we may see it tweaked to be 4 power with maybe a bigger upside. I don't tend to run Wraths like that, but I know especially in Chris's Alesha deck, there are a couple older ones that care about power and wouldn't hit his board, so even moving down to the 3 power would be beneficial for the decks like Alesha, or even a Shuri deck that, is in 2 colors or something like that care about low-powered creatures.
Yeah, this is something I was thinking more of your Jeru deck, Dana. Yeah, well, it would kill Jeru. All your little tokens that your Planeswalkers create would survive something like that.
Yeah, I think this is interesting and I like it. And I think white, they've really done a nice job in the last few years with giving, because white gets a board up every set, and it would be very easy to have those be redundant or be not useful or, be not as good as Wrath of God or Austere Command or something. But looking at my decks the last few years, I really have a diverse spread of board wipes based on what the deck wants to do. Maybe this deck is going to need to deal with artifacts or enchantments, so I'm running Cleansing Nova and Austere Command. In this particular deck over here, I don't have a ton of creatures, so I'm going to want to cast one for super cheaply, so I'm going to use Vanquish the Horde from the new Midnight Hunt. I have that in a couple decks, but not every deck, because I have some decks that still want to run Fumigate because there's a bunch of creatures in it, and I want to gain 14 life or something, and I still have Tragic Arrogance in a deck, and because that it just plays with what that deck wants to do. White's just done a really good job with all these new board wipes, making you have to make tough decisions. And I think the same thing is true here. If they're lowering this to 3, that really changes. There's going to be some decks where it's fantastic and some decks where you don't want it. I think that's perfect when white has 15 different board wipes getting played depending on what your deck wants to do. That's ideally what we want to see, and I think this kind of thing helps with that. So, yeah, I like this for sure.
I like that they're doing it, too, because it actually prevents them from making an overpowered card, too, because it's limiting to what they can do with it.
The next one on my list was Illusions. This is primary blue, and what's changing here is, and we've already seen this on some of the illusions from the Commander precons over the last couple months, but it'll say sacrifice if targeted by a spell, and the old wording was if it was targeted by a spell or ability. So they're dropping that ability clause, so your illusions are a little more stable to stick around on your board state.
That is bogus because my phantasmal image still dies from being targeted by an ability, so we should just, errata it all to say that. No, that would be totally broken. No.
That would make Dr. Mike very happy.
Speaking of, he just kept dinging me last week whenever like one of those new Stranger Things cards come out. He's just like so excited about all the new different clue things coming out.
I actually got to see him the other day at the store. He came in and I spent an hour with him going over D&D stuff because he's getting into D&D.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
Wow.
He hasn't been playing on Tuesdays recently because like he's been on call for the entire month of October. But
I told him, I was like, you're actually closer to work if you were here, right? And he's like, yeah. Like, but I feel bad. I'd feel bad getting up, having to leave for work. I'm like, well, you're going to save lives, so who cares what people think?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
You're just like, I have to run.
No one's going to be upset if you're like, oh no, I got called into the hospital to do something for someone who's needing medical help. No one's going to have a problem with that, I don't think.
Yeah.
All right, Max, what else do we have here from you?
The next one I found interesting was they talked about rewarding rewards for death. This used to be primary black and secondary in red, and now they've added it's still primary for black, but it's secondary to white, and they've moved red to being a tertiary color that gets this ability. Obviously, black gets the most benefit off of triggers of things dying, whether it's draining the table, making a token, making people sacrifice stuff with other cards. But white now has cards that gain life or make tokens. We saw that with Afterlife from one of the newer Ravnica sets. And then red will also still have creatures that, when they die, they tend to deal damage to something. So it was just really interesting to see that they bumped white up to secondary. So it'll be cool to see what else happens with white in the future when it comes to when your creature dies, something happens.
Yeah, some of these I'm wondering, so how they're saying, we're moving it from tertiary to secondary or from off the scale onto the scale type of thing. I think it is more to play with maybe multicolor, where a card is blue-white or black-white. So you kind of have to move it up because that is already within the white color pie for commander purposes.
Yeah, I'm betting it's a combination of like, we want to do more of this, so we're telling you that we're going to be doing more of this, or oops, we've been doing more of this and didn't really realize it, so we better let you guys, we're going to officially make it policy so no one can point back and say, I thought red didn't get this, but you've been doing it for 4 years. It's a combination of those two things where like they're telling us what's going to happen and they're going back and be like, oops, we've already been doing this, so we should make a note of it somewhere.
And then my last one is playing cards off the top of your library. So these cards typically have the clause, you may look at the top card of your library and play it if it's a certain thing, a creature, an artifact, and you have to pay its mana cost. So we see this in like Yeva Nature's Herald, you got Mystic Forge that does it, there's tons of cards that do this.
Bolus's Citadel.
Right,
yep.
Yeah.
So the old alignment was it was a primarily a blue ability, and green it was secondary to green. And after review, they've figured out that they don't print this effect very often. So they've now moved every color to secondary. So they're saying any color can have this ability, but at the rate they print it, they didn't feel comfortable making them all primary, which I found interesting because, when you look back, you do only get like one card a year that does this, or maybe two.
Yeah.
There was that snake shaman dude from Amonkhet that was the mythic that lets you do it. Then we got Mystic Forge, the next year in a core set. Bolus's Citadel, was around there too, but it's pretty rare when they do this because it is a very powerful effect being able to look at, your library, cast stuff.
Yep.
In the case of Mystic Forge, you can exile the top card for a life just to get it out of the way. So I definitely like the fact that this is a secondary ability to all colors because of how rare it's printed.
Green's version of it occasionally is like reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature or a land or some combination of those two things, you can play it. The kind of Oracle of Moldiah effect. So we get that in green. I can't think of what White's version of this is, but this would be one where you could combine kind of as a card draw effect a little bit, where you could do play the top card of your library, reveal it if it's an enchantment. you can play it. Like, I think that would be perfectly fair. Like a white version of Mystic Forge or something. It would be, enchantments in terms of playing them for free because there aren't any ever zero cost ones, or you don't have the cost reducers like you do with artifacts. That would be way safer than Mystic Forge, I think. And Mystic Forge isn't really a problem in Commander. It's only been an issue in old formats where everyone's got a ton of zero drop artifacts in their decks. So yeah, I think I'd like to see some more of this in white maybe show up as well. The white's variant on Future Sight would be kind of cool, I think.
Yeah, it would be pretty cool. I did, so Tuesday when I was sorting cards, there was guys playing next to me, and a guy actually played a Bolsa Citadel, does this similar thing, you can cast off top of your library, lose life equal to CMC or whatever. And he had I think it was the 4-mana artifact that you gain a life every time you cast a spell or something like that, where it starts stacking for storm count.
Aetherflux Reservoir.
Oh, yep.
And he got it up there high enough where he just started jamming spells off the top of his library, and he was netting life off of them. And I was like, oh no, you guys are in for it hard. And he's just like, this has never happened before. What is going on?
So Dana, your comment on thinking of the white one, I'm not seeing, and I briefly typed into Scryfall, cast card from top of your library. So far, the only one I'm seeing is that new, like, they're all multicolored cards. So like Elsha, Galea,
sure.
But so far I'm not seeing a mono white one. So like Monk class does it, Narset, the Narset we don't like Chris playing does it. One of the Narset Planeswalkers does it, yeah, but I'm not seeing anything mono white.
Well, hopefully it'd be nice to see some of those come
Tazri.
down the road. So, Tazri kind of does, yeah.
But it's part of his 5-color ability.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, that's something to kind of look forward to there as well. So. Okay, well, I think that is going to wrap up episode 291. I hope that this was interesting hearing us kind of break this down. I thought it was kind of fun to read, just to see what their official thoughts were on the Color Pie and where it's going and where it's been. So, yeah, that was fun, and hopefully this was insightful to you out there in listener land as well.
I was very disappointed that we didn't get a 6-color. It was like teased
purple?
at us years ago, and now, I saw this article, I'm like, oh, is we going to have something deep in here? And I'm going digging, and I read all the fine print and everything, and there was nothing even hinted. I was like, this is not fun.
Well, I was kind of hoping they'd talk about colorless a little bit more, like this is what we're going to do in colorless versus what we don't want to do, but they didn't really touch on that at all, which I think would be kind of useful as well. But yeah, we didn't get that here either. So
yeah, especially seeing I heard something about the next, is it Jumpstart was supposed to have something with Eldrazi in it or something?
Yes.
So.
Yeah. So, it's for what it was. I guess maybe they don't consider colorless part of the color pie, I guess. Who knows? But you'd think they would have touched on it. But I think there was a lot of information here, and it was a useful read. So if you haven't read it, I would go out there and find it, and we'll see if we can put the link in the tweet when it goes out about the show next Monday. If you haven't read it, it's easy to find. Just do a search for Mark Rosewater and the color pie update. You should be able to find that link. All right, that will wrap up episode 291. I am Dana. You can find me on the Twitter birds at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDRCentral_Max. And you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. Our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. And our show is edited by Rafael Garcia. You can find him on Twitter at Ursa Bearwalker. We'll be back next week with a new show. Until then, I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.